In the vibrant port city of Brighton's Edge, nestled along the Atlantic coast, stood a beloved culinary institution, the Harbour Grill. For decades, the seaside restaurant had been more than just a dining spot. It was a landmark, where fishermen brought in their morning catch, where local couples celebrated anniversaries, and where tourists lined up to taste the famed crab-stuffed sirloin. And behind it all was the Rousseau family. To most outsiders, the Rousseaus seemed like a perfect team. Harold and Delilah Rousseau, husband and wife duo, co-owned the place. Their daughter Camille, charming and business-savvy, was the face of the brand. And then there was Elijah, the son few people noticed, except when he was quietly working the prep station or sweeping up after hours. Elijah Rousseau, 26, had grown up with his hands in flour and smoke in his hair. From age 13, he had shadowed the executive chef like a silent apprentice, learning not just recipes, but rhythm, when to sear, when to pause, how to blend delicate sauces and bold flavors into symphonies on a plate. He read cookbooks like Holy Scripture, spent his weekends testing new techniques, and dreamed not of fame or fortune, but of earning his family's respect in the only world he'd ever loved, the kitchen. Camille, meanwhile, had always had the spotlight. 4 years older, eloquent, and relentlessly polished, she graduated with a business degree and immediately began touting ideas for rebranding the Harbour Grill into a trendy fusion gastropub. She had never sliced an onion, but she could pitch a marketing campaign with poise. To their parents, she was the visionary. Elijah? Just the boy with sauce-stained sleeves and calloused fingers. For years, Elijah held on to hope. He told himself that one day, when his parents saw his dedication, they'd pass the torch. That when the time came to name a successor, he'd be called to the head of the kitchen, not because of bloodline, but because of merit. That day finally arrived on a breezy April evening. The family gathered around their old mahogany dining table, one that had hosted countless family dinners and holiday toasts. Elijah sat eagerly, his palms slick with nervous sweat, trying not to let hope crack his composure. Harold cleared his throat, a rehearsed speech clearly loaded behind his eyes. "We've made a decision," he began, "about the future of the Harbour Grill." Elijah leaned in, his heart thrumming like a drumline. "We're entrusting the restaurant to Camille." Silence. At first, Elijah chuckled, thinking it was some dry family joke. "What?" Camille smiled politely, folding her manicured hands. "It just makes sense. I know the business side. I live in that kitchen," Elijah said, his voice cracking slightly. "I've been there every day since I was 13. Camille doesn't even know where we keep the saffron." Delilah, his mother, waved a hand dismissively. "Honey, don't be dramatic. You're a wonderful cook, but running a business is bigger than cooking. Camille knows how to strategize, handle investors, manage the brand. I manage the flame on every single dish that comes out of our kitchen," Elijah shot back. Harold held up a calming hand. "And that's why we're offering you a position. In the kitchen. You'll start at the bottom and work your way up. Dishwasher, prep, line cook, just like everyone else." Elijah blinked. "You want me to wash dishes? In the restaurant I helped build?" Camille gave a little laugh. "Isn't that what you've always done, Eli? Be in the kitchen? I mean, come on, this is a chance to prove yourself. From the bottom up." His throat tightened. "I've already proven myself." Harold's voice dropped in that patronizing way Elijah had always hated. "This is about humility, son. About earning it. I've earned every goddamn inch I've taken in that place." "Language," Delilah snapped. But it was too late. The room had already shifted. Elijah looked around the table, trying to find even a flicker of doubt in their eyes. There was none. Only certainty. They had made their choice. Camille the CEO, Elijah the dishwasher. He swallowed the burning humiliation, and with a cold, brittle smile, stood up. "Thank you," he said. "I'll make the most of it." And he did. But not in the way they expected. For the next year, Elijah worked in the back of the Harbour Grill, unseen and unheard, scrubbing pans and dumping compost. He kept his head down, but his eyes open. He watched how Camille treated staff like pawns, firing longtime servers who didn't fit the vibe. He watched the kitchen suffer as cheaper ingredients replaced local ones. He listened as regulars whispered complaints about smaller portions and blander dishes. He endured the eye rolls from Camille when he offered suggestions. He withstood being belittled by his own mother, who told him he lacked vision. He even swallowed the bitter taste of seeing his favorite line cook replaced by a flashy influencer chef Camille found on TikTok. But in the quiet, Elijah was building something. A vision. A plan. A rebellion. He networked with old chefs, saved every dollar he earned, and began sketching ideas for a restaurant that would restore pride to their city's food scene. One that wouldn't trade soul for SEO, or authenticity for aesthetic. He'd call it Low Tide. A name that whispered humility, craftsmanship, and quiet power beneath the surface. If the Harbor Grill was the lighthouse shining for tourists, Low Tide would be the storm below. And when the time came, Elijah wouldn't ask for permission. He'd take his place, not by inheritance, but by fire. The silverware clinked against chipped porcelain plates. The grease trap gurgled. The kitchen at the Harbor Grill, once a symphony of culinary brilliance, had turned into a discordant mess of frozen deliveries, undercooked fish, and chaos camouflaged in curated playlists and influencer lighting. Camille Rousseau stood at the head of the kitchen, clipboard in hand, designer heels clicking against the tile. She was all buzzwords and branding now, talking about streamlining supplier chains and shifting focus to Instagrammable plating. But anyone who actually worked in the kitchen knew the truth: the soul of the restaurant had evaporated. And Elijah Rousseau? He was still there. Hidden behind steam, suds, and silence. The dishwasher pit had become his observation post. Every night, elbow deep in murky water and forgotten silverware, he watched his family's legacy crumble from the inside out. Customers who once knew his name barely recognized him now, scrubbed clean from the front of house like a grease stain. The first domino fell during a Friday dinner rush. The restaurant was full: tourists, locals, regulars with deep wallets and shallow patience. The moment the food started arriving at tables, the tension was immediate. "This salmon's raw," a woman muttered to her husband. "My risotto's hard," another man said, waving down a server. And then came the VIPs, the Claremont Group, real estate tycoons with deep pockets and legendary appetites. They had been coming to the Harbor Grill for over a decade, always requesting the same table near the window, always ordering the same dry-aged sirloins. But Camille, in her infinite rebranding wisdom, had replaced the meat supplier with a mass-market vendor to cut costs. Elijah knew the moment the plates left the line that disaster was on the menu. From the dish pit, he heard it, sharp voices from the dining room. "I wouldn't feed this to my dog," one of the Claremont partners barked, waving his plate. "Your father used to serve us perfection," another snapped. "Now this? This is a mockery." The restaurant fell deathly silent. Camille rushed to the table, trying to placate them with her signature fake smile and pre-rehearsed apologies. But it was too late. The VIPs stood, tossed down linen napkins like white flags of surrender, and stormed out. Elijah watched through the swinging kitchen doors, heart pounding. That's it, he thought. That's the moment. Later that night, the restaurant dimmed. The last tables were cleared. The staff gathered in the back for what Camille called a performance meeting, but it was nothing more than a blame session. She paced in front of them like a high school principal, her tone biting. "Service has been inconsistent. Food quality is down. I'm getting bad reviews, and I won't tolerate mediocrity." Marco, the headline cook and one of the last original staff members, let out a bitter chuckle. "Maybe that's because you swapped out our fresh seafood for frozen fillets and fired two of our best prep cooks," he muttered. Camille snapped toward him. "If you can't handle evolution, maybe this isn't the kitchen for you." Then she turned, like a predator scenting easier prey, and locked eyes with Elijah. "And you," she said, voice thick with contempt, "stop sulking like some martyr. You're a dishwasher. That's all you are. That's all you've ever been." The staff turned. The air stilled. Elijah didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he stepped forward, peeling off his apron and folding it neatly on the counter. "You really think that, huh?" he said quietly. "I know that," Camille replied with a sneer. Elijah nodded once. "Good to know." And then, he walked out. No theatrics. No slam of the door. Just the quiet resolve of a man who knew what came next. Elijah's apartment was small, above an old bookstore that smelled like ink and mildew. But that night, it felt like a war room. He pulled out his notebooks, pages of handwritten ideas, drawings of potential layouts, ingredient lists, recipes he'd perfected in silence. He flipped through vendor contacts he'd kept secret, emails from former Harbor Grill staff who had messaged him privately, "If you ever leave, take me with you." He opened a blank page. At the top, he wrote, "Low Tide, Launch Strategy." He didn't sleep that night. Over the next few months, Elijah transformed. Not just from dishwasher to dreamer, but from dreamer to tactician. He took bar shifts at a local pub to fund his startup costs. He did freelance catering on weekends, offering private dinner parties under the alias ER Cuisine. Word spread quickly. His risotto? Legendary. His short ribs? Meltingly tender. His attention to detail? Flawless. He rented a small space near the waterfront, cheap, rundown, but full of potential. With the help of a few loyal friends and chefs who left the Harbor Grill after the VIP fiasco, he gutted the place, repainted the walls, rewired the kitchen, and built something real. The heart of Low Tide wasn't the decor or the branding. It was fire. The kind that comes from being underestimated for far too long. By the time Camille noticed the whispers around town, it was too late. Local food blogs were buzzing about a mysterious chef cooking out of the reclaimed Sailor's Tavern. The press started calling him the Rogue Rousseau. And the customers? They were leaving her restaurant in droves. Because word was out, there was a new place in Brighton's Edge. And the food? It tasted like revenge. The night Low Tide officially opened, the sea breeze carried more than the smell of salt, it carried the scent of triumph. The renovated space, once a forgotten fisherman's bar, now glowed with warm brass fixtures, exposed stone walls, and the low hum of conversation layered over jazz. The light from the kitchen flickered like a hearth, casting golden highlights on the plates as they passed the counter. Elijah Rousseau stood in the kitchen, not as a dishwasher or a ghost in his family's shadow, but as executive chef, owner, and architect of his own empire. His chef's coat bore no stitched family crest. Just his name. Simple. Earned. Behind him, the kitchen was alive. Sasha, the pastry prodigy who had been pushed out of the Harbor Grill for being too experimental, now spun sugar and sea salt into works of art. Benji, once the youngest line cook on Camille's staff, now wielded the sauté pans with the precision of a symphony conductor. And Marco, the grizzled kitchen veteran who had watched the Rousseau legacy disintegrate, stood on Elijah's left, trimming a lamb rack with calm mastery. "I haven't felt this alive in a kitchen in years," Marco said under his breath. Elijah nodded once, the corner of his mouth tugging upward. "We're not just cooking, Marco. We're proving a point." By 8 p.m., the restaurant was full. Reservations had been booked out for weeks from the moment the first article hit the local press. Ex-Rousseau chef opens anti-harbor restaurant, and it's stunning. Elijah's menu was tight, focused, and bold. No fusion fads. No foam for show. Just honest food done flawlessly. Lobster bisque infused with sherry and saffron. Bone and ribeye aged in-house. Scallops kissed by the flame, resting on beds of citrus fennel puree. It wasn't trendy. It was timeless. As Elijah plated a tomahawk steak, Jesse, his bartender and longtime friend, poked his head into the kitchen. You're gonna want to see this," he said, eyes wide. Elijah wiped his hands, stepped to the pass, and peered out into the dining room. There she was. Camille Rousseau. Standing at the host stand like a statue dropped in the middle of a battlefield. Her arms were crossed, lips tight, eyes darting across the room. And every table she looked at? Filled with her former customers. Couples who used to celebrate anniversaries at the Harbor Grill. Regulars who knew the Rousseau name before Camille wore it like a crown. Former VIPs sipping Elijah's private label wine and raising their glasses in toasts he never got when he worked behind their scenes. One voice rang out from a corner booth. "Elijah, my man." It was Mr. Wexley, one of the Claremont real estate moguls who had walked out on Camille after that infamous steak debacle. Now he was grinning, napkin tucked into his collar, waving a fork. "This ribeye's a damn miracle, kid," he boomed. "You've outdone yourself." The dining room echoed with laughter and clinking glasses. Camille's face lost all color. Elijah stepped out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. "Welcome to Low Tide," he said smoothly. "Table for one?" Camille's eyes narrowed. "What do you think you're doing?" He tilted his head. "Running a restaurant. You should try it sometime." "You stole my staff." "No," he replied. "You ignored them, disrespected them, and pushed them out. I gave them a reason to stay." She gestured broadly at the full house. "You think this is a win? This little revenge fantasy?" He smiled. "This isn't about revenge, Camille. It's about restoration. This," he pointed toward the dining room, "is what the Harbor Grill used to feel like. Before you turned it into a marketing stunt." Her jaw tightened. "You think this will last? Fads burn out. People get bored. They'll come back." At that moment, one of Elijah's servers walked by, carrying a porterhouse so perfectly seared it glistened under the house lights. The couple at the next table actually gasped. Elijah leaned in. "I don't think they will." Camille clenched her fists. "Mom and Dad are going to hear about this." He grinned. "Oh, I'm counting on it." She turned and stormed out, the restaurant door swinging closed behind her like punctuation. Elijah walked back into his kitchen. He had more steaks to plate. The next morning, Elijah's phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from his mother. Texts from his father. More missed calls from Camille. He didn't answer a single one. Then Jesse texted. "Dude. Check Harbor's Yelp page." Elijah opened it. It was an avalanche. "Used to be our favorite, now it's overpriced and soulless. Cold fries, cheap cuts, and rude management. Heard most of the chefs left for that new place. Guess where I'm eating now?" He actually laughed. Not bitterly. Not triumphantly. Just with the lightness of a man who finally knew he'd been right all along. That afternoon, his father called again. Elijah answered. "Eli," came the deep, strained voice. "We need to talk." "Do we?" "Your mother's upset." Camille's beside herself. "We're not sure how things got this far." Elijah chuckled softly. "You mean how your golden girl ran a beloved restaurant into the ground while I washed dishes? You're stealing our customers." "I'm feeding them." A long pause. "Come home. Let's talk." Elijah leaned back in his chair, gazing out the window at the sea. "I am home." Click. He ended the call. Elijah Rousseau had spent a lifetime waiting for his family to see him. To respect him. To trust his hands, his instincts, his fire. But now, with low tide thriving and the harbor grill sinking, it wasn't their approval he craved anymore. It was clarity, and he had it in spades. The days following Camille's humiliating visit were a whirlwind. Low tide made headlines again, this time in a citywide food journal that declared it the culinary redemption of Brighton's Edge. Local influencers praised its return to soul cooking, while Michelin scouts were reportedly sniffing around. The wait list stretched past 3 months. Meanwhile, the Harbor Grill went into freefall. Camille's desperate attempt at a 40% off promo flopped. Former regulars came out of curiosity, only to be met with cold food, awkward staff, and a dining room that felt like a mausoleum. Social media roasted her with hashtags like #FromHarborToHorror and #LowTideWins. The tide, quite literally, had turned. On a rainy Tuesday evening, the bell above the front door of Low Tide rang gently. Elijah looked up from his pass station just as Sasha walked over. "You're going to want to handle this one personally," she said, tilting her head toward the entrance. Elijah stepped out from the kitchen. Standing at the front, slightly wet from the drizzle outside, were Harold and Delilah Rousseau. His parents. They looked like strangers in a place that should have felt like home. His mother, usually poised and sharp, stood rigid, her lips drawn into a thin line. His father looked older, tired in a way Elijah had never seen before, shoulders slumped, eyes scanning the walls as if seeking a familiar landmark that no longer existed. Elijah took his time walking over. "Table for two?" he asked, calm as a sea on a windless day. "Eli," his father said, exhaling like the word was a weight. "You can talk while you eat. We're running a halibut special tonight." "I hear it's excellent," Elijah replied, already turning toward a quiet corner table. Delilah bristled. "Don't be flippant." He turned back, slowly. "I'm just following the family motto, Mom. You know, work your way up." Her cheeks flushed. They sat down without another word. He brought them water himself, then leaned against the table, arms folded. "So, what's this really about?" Harold looked around the room, nodding almost reluctantly at the bustling energy of the kitchen, the full tables, the laughter. "The harbor's dying." Elijah nodded once. "Yes. It is." His mother leaned in. "Camille's overwhelmed. She's not built for this. Not the way you are." "Oh? You don't say." His father cleared his throat. "We made a mistake. We should have given you a real shot. We see that now. And what do you want from me?" Delilah wrung her napkin between her fingers. "We want you to come back. Take over the kitchen. Bring the food back. Save the name." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "What about Camille? She's stepping away. Consulting. Something else." Elijah laughed under his breath. "Of course she is." He looked between the two people who had shaped his earliest love for food, and had then dismissed it as a hobby. "You want me to save a ship you let her crash into the rocks?" They didn't answer. He leaned forward, voice low. Miller's isn't struggling, it's sinking. And you didn't come here for me. You came because I'm the only lifeboat left. Delilah's eyes watered slightly, but she said nothing. Harold's face tensed. What would it take, Elijah? What do you want? He pulled a folded piece of paper from his apron and slid it across the table. Harold opened it. His face paled. You want to buy the Harbor Grill? For cheap, Elijah said. Because that's what it's worth now. Delilah gasped. You can't be serious. I'm very serious. Because here's the truth, it stopped being a restaurant the moment you chose branding over the kitchen. I'm not saving your legacy, I'm replacing it. Harold clenched his jaw. This was our family's name. No, Elijah said calmly. It was your name. I built this without it. Silence pressed against the table like another guest. We'll think about it, his father muttered finally. Elijah stood. Take your time. But not too much. Because the only thing worse than a dying restaurant. He looked around, gesturing toward the packed room. Is watching your former dishwasher become king while you're still clinging to a sinking throne. And with that, he turned and walked back into the kitchen. 2 weeks later, the call came. His father's voice was tight, almost ashamed. It's yours. Elijah said nothing. He didn't have to. He signed the papers within 48 hours. Ownership transferred. No fanfare. No congratulations. Just ink on paper and the sound of a door finally closing behind him. But Elijah had no plans to save the Harbor Grill. He was going to gut it. Reimagine it. Erase everything that had once excluded him. The family name? Gone. The branding? Burned. In 6 months, a new sign would hang above the doors. A name that honored the fire, not the family. Prime by Elijah Rousseau. 6 months. That's how long it took Elijah Rousseau to erase generations of neglect and replace it with something worthy. The building once known as the Harbor Grill didn't just receive a facelift, it underwent a full rebirth. The dingy nautical kitchen outdated mariner murals were gone, replaced by minimalist elegance, warm wood paneling, polished stone counters, and soft pendant lighting. The kitchen was rebuilt from the floor up, state-of-the-art equipment, open layout, a chef's table tucked just beside the pass. And above the door, in bold steel letters backlit by soft gold light. Prime by Elijah Rousseau. No mention of the family name. No whispers of Camille's short-lived reign. Just Elijah's name. The one they'd overlooked. Now a beacon. The grand reopening night arrived on a cool autumn evening. The streets of Brighton's Edge buzzed with anticipation. The line outside Prime wound down the sidewalk, a mix of old harbor regulars, food critics, and curious newcomers drawn by the buzz. The restaurant was booked solid for the next 3 months, and the city's most coveted food magazine had already called Prime the return of soul to the plate. Inside, the atmosphere simmered with controlled energy. Sasha led the pastry station like a maestro, plating roasted fig tartlets with honey mascarpone. Benji seared duck breast with the kind of concentration usually reserved for brain surgery. Elijah moved between stations silently, eyes sharp, hands calm, adjusting garnishes here, slicing delicately there, lifting spoons to his lips and nodding with approval. Every table was filled. Every guest smiling. Then, the door opened. And in walked Camille. Elijah saw her before she saw him. She stood near the entrance, arms crossed, eyes scanning the restaurant like she walked into someone else's dream. Because she had. She stepped forward slowly, heels clicking against the polished floors, until her eyes met the sign behind the bar. Prime by Elijah Rousseau. No confusion. No branding gimmicks. No family. Just the man she'd once called just a dishwasher. Elijah stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. He walked over, calm and steady. You lost? He asked. Camille didn't smile. Her expression was unreadable. Just curious. He raised an eyebrow. About? She glanced around at the packed dining room, the polished silverware, the synchronized ballet of the kitchen staff. You had everything with low tide, she said finally. Why take this too? Elijah exhaled slowly. Not angry. Not gloating. Just steady. I didn't take anything, Camille. I bought what was left. She flinched at that. You could have let it die quietly. I could have, he agreed. But this wasn't about revenge. It never was. She looked skeptical. Then what was it? He tilted his head, voice dropping low. Closure. Proof. That I was always meant to run it. That you weren't the only Rousseau who mattered. Camille's lips parted slightly, as if she might fire back, but nothing came out. Her gaze flicked back to the name on the wall. There was no winning this one. No slick press release. No investor bailout. Just reality. She turned without another word and left, her footsteps swallowed by the hum of the restaurant. And that was the sweetest victory of all. A year later. Prime was still the crown jewel of Brighton's Edge. Elijah had opened a second location, and Low Tide, now operated by Sasha and Benji, continued to thrive with its rustic charm and cult following. His parents? They had quietly retired and moved south, perhaps realizing their legacy was now one they no longer recognized. Camille? She tried to launch a hospitality consulting brand, but the market was saturated, and her name, once prestigious, was now a cautionary tale. Few called. Even fewer trusted. And Elijah? Elijah finally had what he'd always wanted. Not just a restaurant. Not just a name on a sign. But respect. Earned, not given. Not inherited. He sat one night at the chef's table, a glass of wine in hand, watching the kitchen hum like a perfectly tuned machine. A young culinary student approached him nervously. "Chef Rousseau. Can I ask how you did it? How you made it through everything?" Elijah smiled, eyes steady. "I stopped asking for a seat at their table," he said. "And built my own." He raised his glass. "To fire. To patience. To never being told who you are, only showing them." And somewhere deep in the quiet corners of his memory, he could still hear Camille's voice calling him a dishwasher. Now? He smiled. Because that dishwasher built an empire.